Father Paul McNellis, Hill High School class of 1965, the Father Greg Tolaas Distinguished Service Award. Paul was studying political science at the University of Minnesota when he decided to enlist in the Army and head off to Vietnam. In 1970 and 1971, Father served in the Military Assistance Command, working closely with the South Vietnamese Army reconnaissance units. When he returned to the U.S. after finishing his work as a reporter in Vietnam, and while working as a reporter at KSCP, Father continued to study the Vietnamese language in hopes of returning to work for the Catholic Relief Services. Instead, Father was called to Cambodia, where they were facing a severe refugee crisis due to the war. He deferred an acceptance to Cornell University and went to work with the Emergency Relief Group. Paul left Cambodia in 1975 and headed to Cornell. While there, he decided to enter the Jesuit order. He left Cornell for Syracuse, New York, where he prepared for a life as a Jesuit. He went on to study at Oxford, Munich, and Rome, and he was ordained in 1987. Father was assigned to the Gregorian University in Rome, and later to Boston College, where he currently teaches philosophy. In his spare time, he leads an organization called the Sons of St. Patrick, which helps young men explore issues of what it means to be good Catholic gentlemen. The group values respect for others and Christ and a sense of loyalty and duty to a cause. I warned you that this night was going to be humbling. On top of all of this, Father continues his work with the Jesuits in Vietnam, with Project Rachel, the pro-life movement, and prison ministry in Boston. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in congratulating the 2019 Father Greg Tolaas Distinguished Service Award honoree, Father Paul McNellis.
Good evening. It's an honor to come back to the high school I graduated from more than 54 years ago. This award is a great honor for me. I'm very strict with my students at Boston College on attendance, so the only excused absence is if you're in the hospital. So I had some trepidation on how to explain to them that they wouldn't see me in class today. And I said, I'm going back to the high school I graduated from more than 54 years ago. And I said, if I don't make this, they're not going to give me another 50 years. I want to thank especially Judy Schwartz, Christine Jones, or the two that I work with most closely, but everyone else from the Alumni and Development Office. With time, it becomes more and more important that a school like this can't continue to exist without a robust Development and Alumni Office. I want to thank my family that could be here. There were a couple more that wanted to be here, but work requirements at the last minute didn't allow them to attend. My sister Maura and her husband Bill, and their sons Nick and Matt. My sister Nora, who kindly reminded me that when I graduated from here, she was 2 years old. My niece-in-law Joanna and my grandniece Alex. Thank you for being here. Their schools were, I come from a family I'm the oldest of 9. And I sometimes half-jokingly say, by the time I entered the priesthood, I pretty much dealt with every pastoral problem in the family except murder and kidnapping. Devin, I wasn't going to talk about this, but you gave me the courage to at least get one anecdote. I think junior year, I was vice president of the student council. We were responsible for planning the senior prom. And we thought we were so clever that we could push the curfew if we had part of it in Minneapolis and part of it in St. Paul. And the reason for that was, this may be hard to believe, but this was local government back in those days. The city council in St. Paul and Minneapolis went on daylight saving time at a 2-week difference, not at the same time. And so that if we could have the dance in St. Paul and the dinner in Minneapolis, we'd get an extra hour. So we thought. There were two unacknowledged, it seemed to us, principles at Hill. One was, stay away from Minneapolis. There's too many blonde Lutherans over there. Which made crossing the Mississippi all that more intriguing. And the other was, I think I had the impression that the brothers took as a directional principle that the goal of their one of the primary goals of their education here was to educate us and form us in such a way that we would have minimal contact with the juvenile criminal justice system. And looking back on it, they were not entirely wrong. And they did a pretty good job. And that weighs in more. There's two topics I want to address briefly tonight. One is a great regret, and one is about a great debt of gratitude. The regret is the only regret I have that's associated in any way with Hill Murray. But it has nothing to do with the school, it's on me. If I could relive the years since 1965, I would make a greater effort to stay in touch with other alumni, with my classmates from 50 plus years ago. Granted, there were many years outside of Minnesota and outside of the USA, but still looking back on it, I think I could have done more. Not that I didn't have contact with classmates, but I wish now, looking back, that I had done more of that. Much of it I attributed to the tendency of youth to take too much for granted and to focus on the future. If I could speak to today's students, I would encourage them to do a better job than I did and keep in touch with classmates. And the importance of this I learned later than I should have. John Hernandez, who's in Rochester with health problems, he wanted to be here. Jim O'Donnell in St. Louis, both of them taught me a lot about that, set me right. More recently, Jack Reif, Don Howie. John Ahern, who has some serious health problems, came here for the reception, but he's looking quite good, actually, but his wife Janet is here. And they pointed out to me, better to learn some things late than not at all. The importance of looking back at what I received here. And the real stimulus to that was when I became a teacher myself. I taught at our high school at St. Peter's Prep, at the Gregorian in Rome, alternate summers in Vietnam for 21 years, and Boston College for the last 20. I realized that teaching is a lot like parenthood. You do the best you can, hoping that what you're doing will help those God has put in your care. It takes an act of faith and hope. The judgment on parenthood, usually, and many blessings, start when you become grandparents. For teachers, especially at those most important years, grade school and high school, they hear from very few of their former students compared to the great number that pass through their classrooms. As a priest, I have a special advantage in a way. I have students from BC that I had as freshmen, that I've married, whose children I've baptized. It's like the grandfather stage of the priesthood for me. It's one of the happiest times of my life. And something I would not have experienced if I had remained in Rome. Most of my students would have been religious. And as a scared, young, beginning teacher, for me, that was in our high school in Jersey City, you begin to review all the teachers who ever helped you. For me, that was from second grade on, Richfield School, Nativity in Bloomington, St. Mary's in downtown St. Paul, and Hill. In teaching at BC, I developed a new appreciation for Catholic schools, and in particular high schools. and for my Midwestern roots. And one of the advantages of being a Midwesterner and joining the New York Province of the Society of Jesus is you can periodically remind people from New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, that when they talk about going to the city, it could also mean not just New York, but Minneapolis, Madison, Chicago. You can also point out to them that Iowa and Ohio are not diverse pronunciations of one place, but they're two separate places. You can also point out that there is no West Dakota. But it's a lot of fun to troll them until they catch on. Sometimes almost for a week. If you can find West Dakota on the map, I'll take you to dinner. We have 123 students from Minnesota at Boston College, 2 currently from Hill Murray, and 1 more coming in next year. At BC, I teach mostly freshmen and some seniors. With my freshmen, in the first couple of weeks, I have a very clear idea. They're only a summer away from high school. I have a good idea at the end of week 2 what kind of high school they went to and what kind of family they've come from. And I want to say something about, I hope this doesn't sound overblown, but I mean it in dead seriousness. The future of Western civilization, in my mind, depends on schools like this. I take it for granted that their students and everyone that you deal with are made in the image and likeness of God, and that God's love has been manifested for us in Christ. Yes, of course, the curriculum is important, and it was excellent here. But this other thing I'm talking about, these presupposed principles that guide the way faculty and coaches and administrators treat each other and the students. It creates a certain atmosphere. And of course, people working from the same presupposition toward the same goal. At high school age, you learn an awful lot by imitation. Not only observing how faculty, staff, coaches treat you, but how they treat each other. So some things are not explicitly taught, but implicitly. And I picked this up when I've had to evaluate other high schools. In some schools, as soon as you walk in the front door, there's a different atmosphere you pick up. And I think it's due to all of these things that I've just mentioned. I'm old enough now, so most of those I'd like to thank personally have long since retired or gone to God. But as a current teacher and priest, I'm trying to pass on to my students what I received here beginning almost 58 years ago. And my heartfelt thanks to those who have stepped in to take their place. Let's support this school. It's a good work.